Well, good morning, all. Thank you for joining me today for this daily dose of the Word, brought to you by Alex here on Maryland Avenue. We're going to be starting in the book of John today, and I'm super excited about this book because John is just by far my favorite gospel, and I'm reading this with a friend right now, so I figure what a better opportunity to begin reading this than to be able to kind of talk through it and walk through it with you guys, the students. So let me go ahead and get it started off in a quick prayer. Probably take a quick sip of my coffee, and then we will get underway. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, God. Thank you for the opportunity for us to sit down and read your word. God, I pray that it is both fruitful and helpful for us, that we can gain a better understanding of who you are and what you desire from us, Lord, that you can direct our paths through this kind of crazy world right now. Lord, give us rest in your presence. Help us to just trust in everything that you're doing and just find truth in your word today and ultimately use your word to draw us closer to you. Lord, I pray all these things in your name. Amen. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start. We're going to pretty much go section by section. We will likely not make it all the way through verse 18. In fact, I'd be surprised if we made it even probably halfway through. But we're going to walk through it kind of slowly. And again, kind of look for those things of repetition. Look for those things that stick out. Look for those things that the author is really trying to reveal to us about this text. All right, so how about we start with these first few verses, verses 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All right, so first thing that we notice, right? First thing that we notice. There's going to be a lot of repetition, it looks like, in these first few verses. All right, so first thing we notice is this repetition of this God, the Word, right? So we have the Word, the Word, the Word, and specifically it says the Word was in the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word, oh gosh, how to do this one? Let's say, was God, right? So in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. So that almost closes it out. All right, so we can bracket that in. Begins with the fact that he was in the beginning, ends with the fact that he was in the beginning. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So again, I think we have another kind of that repetition happening again. So let's go ahead and bracket that one in. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. All right, so contextually, if we were reading this for the first time, we might be a little bit confused, right? We might be a little bit confused about who this word is. Now, we do get a little bit of a clue down here, so I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit, right? If you fast forward down here, because we might not get here, but verse 14, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." So, based on verses 14 and 15, we know that up here in verse 1 and 2 and 3, that when it's speaking about the Word is Jesus. So let's go ahead and write that. All right. Pen to fail on me. The Word, capital W, equals Jesus. All right. The Word equals Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All right, so three things we can take away from that right from the beginning, right? Clearly, John is trying to make a point here. He's saying that Jesus was there at the beginning. And when we mean beginning, we don't mean like Jesus was created at some point during creation. In fact, we see here in verse 3, right? We'll go ahead and note that. We see here in verse 3 that he was involved in creation. Involved in creation. All right, so number two thing we see, right? And the Word was with God. So Jesus was there at the beginning. He was there with God. And then the third thing we see is it says, and the Word was God. All right. So here we have the doctrine of the Trinity starting to come a little bit into play, the confusing doctrine of the Trinity. We're not going to get overwhelmed by it today, but we do need to note that Jesus is also God. So lots to take away from that first 3 verses, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. I think that's a cool thing to note, right? Not anything. All things. All right, so when we talk about Jesus being there at the beginning of creation, it wasn't just that he was there at creation. It's that everything that was made with his knowledge. In fact, it was made through him. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. All right, so there's a kind of cool theological point, right? So we know that Jesus is the life.
Connecting to the internet. Check out the help section in your Ultimate Ears app.
Here's the culprit. My speaker. She's being disruptive. All right, so this is kind of a cool thing we see. We see that Jesus is the life. He is the light. And the darkness has not overcome it. So cool theological truth right here. All right, the darkness has not overcome it. So we know the ultimate victory in the end is Jesus. Ultimate victory through Jesus. Always. So a few things we see, right? He is the Word. He is the life. He is the light. Lots going on there. All right, 6 and 7 and 8. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about him. So I think here's a cool point we see about our purpose right here as believers, right? Our purpose as believers. Our purpose as believers is to do what? To bear witness about the light. Right? To bear witness about the light. So it's clear in distinction, and making the distinction that John himself was not the light, but instead he came to bear witness about the light with the purpose, all right, here's that word that, with the purpose that all might believe through him. So that's similar to like our role or job as Christians. Our role or job as Christians is to bear witness about the light, to bear witness about Jesus. All right, coffee sip. Ooh, that is very strong. In case you cannot tell, it is still steaming and piping, but it is a very bold, strong cup of coffee. Everyone take a sip of their coffee now. All right. So let's see. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness. So I'll note that again. There's 3 repetitions of that. So you have 1, 2, 3. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. Oh, here we go. This is where this repetition begins to get really cool, right? So we have up here, we have down here, the world was made through him. Bada bang. And then what do we have up here, right? Up here, all things were made through him. Draw a line there. Skadoosh. Bada bing, bada boom. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. So again, we see that stressing of the point that was being made by John here about the fact that it's important to believe, right? So he said that John the Baptist, right? Let's make a distinction real quick. John the Baptist is who's being talked about here. The Apostle John is the one who wrote this gospel. So two distinctions to be made, right? So John the Baptist here, Apostle John wrote the gospel. So John is making this tie-in here. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, right? So again, that repetition of belief, faith. The thing that ultimately makes Christianity unique opposed to other religions is this idea right here. That salvation is found through this belief, right? Because it says, but to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Right? So in other religions, in order to become a child of God, in order to be saved, in order to receive salvation, it's dependent on your works and your ability to earn that, to achieve that status. Well, John's making the distinction and saying, listen, the whole reason why John the Baptist came in the world is that people might believe in him. And when people do believe him, when people do receive him, that's when they get the right to become children of God. So that's another important distinction to make. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right. I love that word. He gave the right to become children of God. Who are born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Okay, we are going to get to 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. All right, again, there's a lot to talk about in these few verses, and so we're not going to have the time to dwell on all of it. But there are a few things that I think are important to notice, and that is a lot of these repeated words. Right, so we talked about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That means Jesus came into the world. We have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. All right? So Jesus was full of grace and truth. From his fullness we have received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He made him known. So again, we have that repetition of some of the things that we are fully given through Jesus, most notably grace and truth, right? And I love this phrase right here, for from his fullness we have received grace upon grace, right? When it comes to our sin, when it comes to our struggles, when it comes to our issues, think about this. The grace that we have received is completely never end. It just never ends. It's never satisfied. We never run out of that grace. We're given grace upon grace. It's like if I were to have this coffee cup, right, and I were to keep dumping coffee into it, right, coffee upon coffee upon coffee, it begin to overflow. be like a never-ending stream of coffee coming out of this cup. It's the same idea with grace, right? There's never a time or a situation where we exhaust the grace from Jesus, right? It's through faith in him, it's through belief in him that we're saved, and he offers this grace as a result of our faith in him. So I think there's a great beauty in that. All right, so taking all that into consideration, again, I know that's not an exhaustive list of what we could talk about, but let's begin to pull a few things from this that can maybe apply to us today. A few things to us that can maybe apply to us today. I think the first one that stood out to me was here in verse 6, 7, and 8. Right, 6, 7, and 8. This idea of bearing witness to the light. So it's on the back here, making notes of this. Number 1, bearing witness about the light, right? So we as Christians, we as people who believe in Jesus Christ are called to bear witness about who Jesus is. So how can we bear witness about Jesus even while separated from most other people? Right, so this is definitely a kind of an interesting time where we're separated from a lot of people. We're typically isolated in our own homes, maybe with our family and whatnot. But how can we begin to do this? How can we continue to bear witness about who Jesus is with the people around us, even while we're kind of separated? I think we should begin to think through that. Second thing, verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Guys, this is a really dark time. I mean, this is a really difficult time and a difficult season that we're walking through. I don't know that many of us have ever walked through something like this before, where the whole world is practically being shut down for what's going on right now. So I think this would definitely qualify as a dark time. But I think the important thing to remember is that regardless of the darkness that we face, it never overcomes Jesus, right? In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So that light that Jesus is shining, right, will never be overcome, regardless of whether it's a war, a virus, a leader, whoever it may be, whatever it is that's on this earth, it will never overcome Jesus, right? So we'll say the darkness of these times in the corona pandemic can never overcome Jesus. Last one, number 3. One more thing that we can take away. I like this point. I like this point at the end. Let's focus on that. The grace upon grace, right? So from Jesus, we receive never, all caps, never ending grace upon grace. Guys, and this is an important point to make. This is an important last point to think through, because oftentimes we can fall victim in our sin when we're struggling and thinking that God is angry or mad at us. And that could not be further from the truth. When Christ died on the cross for our sins, that was a once and for all event that completely replaced our sinfulness, right? Our righteousness is now viewed as Christ's righteousness. So it's no longer dependent on our ability to be able to earn our way to heaven. Instead, Christ died on the cross and imputed his righteousness, gave his righteousness to us as a free gift, so that whenever we are struggling with sin or falling into temptation, we are receiving this grace from God. God is never angry with us. He certainly sees our sin. He is aware of it. He doesn't like it, but he's not holding it against us because that penalty has already been paid. So 3 things, right? How can we bear witness about Jesus even while separated from most other people? Number 2, the darkness of these times in the corona pandemic can never overcome Jesus. And number 3, from Jesus we receive never-ending grace upon grace. So thanks for joining me again today, guys, with this. Expect 2 of these per week. And I think it's just an awesome time to kind of dive into the Word with you guys. I hope you guys can follow along, and we will be on John 1:19 through whatever next time. All right, talk to you later. Bye.